Welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, the key to PMP exam success. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Hello and welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, where we help put PMP behind your name. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. While there are some knowledge-based questions on the exam, the PMP exam is an experience-based exam. Your task is to apply your experience to the question while remaining within the PMBOK guide framework and find the correct answer. In this lesson, we look at how to apply the concept of quality from the PMBOK guide into the real world. Most often, business applications do not have to achieve the same level of quality, accuracy, and consensus, or be as fault-free as many aerospace, defense, or medical-related systems. That isn't to say that they don't strive for excellence and accuracy, only that it can be tolerated better. As a result, there are different priorities placed on quality and the use of disciplined approaches that demand a lot of upfront time. In this lesson, we welcome Inez Marino to discuss with her approaches that employ such an upfront time commitment that many businesses do not believe they can afford to spend. We also look at the importance of high-quality requirements on projects. The discussion will present to you one important quality concept. Quality is planned and not inspected. Inez and I explore how that is done. Let's hear a little bit about our guest, and then we'll go right into the interview. Inez Marino began her career as an assembler language programmer back in the days when there were no computer science degrees. In 1984, she began a boutique consulting services company specializing in real-time collaborative systems engineering and planning services to large organizations. She is a seasoned technical manager, business leader, and strategic planner committed to ensuring high-quality deliverables based on best practices, disciplined project management approaches, and the use of technology to create business opportunities and resolve business problems. Inez has several published articles and has made a number of national speaking engagements. Hello, Inez, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Cornelius.
To get started with today's interview, let me read a quote from the PMBOK guide. And in the PMBOK guide, we find the following. The ability of the stakeholders to final character of the project's product and the final cost of the project is highest at the start and gets progressively lower as the project continues. Now, we want to look at the value of quality here today. Is it the same with quality? Is it easiest to change the quality of my final product at the beginning than it is at the end?
Well, I don't think if you don't start off with quality, it's very hard to end up with quality. To get at quality, you have to enter into a project with the mindset, it's a decision that this is an effort that we want to put the energy and the effort in to have quality. And ironically, that isn't the way every project is approached. Sometimes it's, we've got to get something out the door, don't worry about it. Time and money are the most significant factors, and the quality isn't even the primary concern.
Yes, and the software industry seems to be riddled with those kind of projects, doesn't it? So what do I need to do up front in order to have such high quality in the end?
Well, as I said, I think it really is a decision and it's a commitment. And it's a complex issue, really, because in business, there's been so much of a drive to get things done quickly. I think some of it started off with the dot-com boom where everything was exploding at a rapid speed. And we saw things happening overnight, and nobody stopped to think about quality because they were in a rush and people were getting rich quickly. And that sort of has spilled over to large corporations. likewise, years and years ago, people signed up for their careers with a company, and they were there for many years, and they had a vested interest in the long-term value of what they were doing, and they took a lot of pride in it. That's not to say people don't take pride in what they're doing today, but they're not there forever. When a better opportunity comes along, they're going to move along with it. So the focus often is on a shorter term deliverable result, demonstrating progress, showing that you've met some arbitrary criteria. And getting to that quality issue becomes a little bit more evasive, a little bit more elusive. People have to be inspired to want to produce quality products. They have to become engaged in it. It has to matter to them for them to put in the energy and their heart to produce something of quality.
I joked a little bit before about the software industry and that we all know of software that is probably not up to the quality that it should be. Is it necessary that everyone in every industry always follows the same quality standards?
No.
That's what I thought.
No. It's relative. I mean, if you're building a medical device that's monitoring somebody's heart, you really have an obligation to put forth your best effort to ensure quality and not to minimize the value of a distribution system or a manufacturing system. They're not on the same level. They don't involve lives. They involve money, and that is of value and importance to many people. But I don't think they are comparable.
What then does this difference in approach to the quality mean to the processes on my project? Do I do anything different?
Well, again, if you look at aerospace, defense, medical devices, etc., where that quality is the most important priority of the project because it affects lives and environments and things like that, compared to a business where it means money, again, not to undermine it because it is important, but the way you approach things are different. You can be more expedient in a business environment. You can cut more corners. You don't need to be as disciplined. You're going after a mass market of resources. So you don't necessarily pay as well, offer the same benefits, incentivize people with the value of their work and of their contribution. So you create a different work environment where people often don't feel as much of an invitation to contribute their ideas or don't have the time to be creative or to look at all of the alternatives because they have to get the job done on time within budget.
Is it sort of a trade-off almost? What can I get away with? How low can I go in my quality and still get away with without losing customers, without aggravating my employees, and still put out a product that's fairly decent?
I agree with you. It's a trade-off. But I think there's something that falls off there because they don't know what their missed opportunities are. They don't really know sometimes how many customers they're annoying and aggravating. There's that lost piece of business sometimes. I don't want to pick on the telephone companies, but everybody, I think, has sat on hold for 30, 40, 50 minutes, And I don't know about you, but I have, on occasion, hung up the phone, picked up the competitor just because I was frustrated. And I didn't get any better service with the next company. But it's all that lost business that you can't quantify, you can't measure. And when you're not doing a quality job all the way through the entire distribution or implementation of your product, you just don't know what you don't have.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me, and you've mentioned it before, that this leads to pretty much one conclusion. You have to have a high time commitment to the quality, and you have to do that on the project up front. You have to start with this commitment of doing quality. So let's talk a bit about best practices. In your experience, what is the best way then to get the team ready for such a high quality approach? How do I, as a project manager, get this across?
Well, communication is always key. It comes out in many different ways. Communication has to be encouraged, first of all. Some organizations actually discourage, don't go talk to the business users. They're busy. They don't have time. Sometimes it's work in your own individual silos because you're going to be more productive that way if you're not busy chatting by the water fountain. When in fact, sometimes those very informal get-togethers are where you get the threads of information that trigger you to think outside the box or think of something different, which can actually augment the whole project. So you have to start off by creating an environment where people are encouraged to communicate. You have to create an environment where people are free to feel comfortable to express their ideas, even when they're not on target. You don't want to discourage them. So often I see in large companies, all kinds of companies, where people have an attitude that they've developed of, I'm just here to do my job. I'm not encouraged to ask questions or make suggestions. So that's the way you have to start off a project, in my opinion, is get that energy going and encourage a lot of interaction with people so that they're flushing these kinds of issues out so you can achieve the best possible quality.
So I hear you say that there is a part of this comes from management, that your environment is appropriate, but a part also comes from you as a project manager, that you encourage your team members to talk to each other and to make a commitment to quality.
Absolutely. And then of course, there's all of the other things that follow. You have to have equipment. You have to have training available. You have to have technologies that are useful, easy to use. You have to have people that have the credentials and the experience to work on the right types of projects. And you have to give people a work environment that's suitable. Things as simple as comfortable chair, adequate lighting. There's so many factors that enter into it. In many companies, I'm actually shocked when I go into them and I see how very few disciplined approaches they use to developing systems or maintaining them. They hire people with a background and experience of a title. They look at the number of companies they've been to, the number of years they've worked in it, and then they make an assumption that that's what they need to be successful in the project. They're an equal contributor. Yet everyone comes from different ways of how they build systems, how they do analysis, how they do design, how they do construction and testing. And they don't necessarily blend well together. They don't necessarily play well together. So the result is there's a lot of tiptoeing around people to be polite, to be good team members. And sometimes it's the louder voice or the higher title that wins out on the approach, as opposed to, is this the better way to do things?
It does sound like a big investment in equipment, in time, in people. Sounds expensive. So what kind of payback will a company see who does follow that approach?
This is all expensive stuff. You can't look at it as just the components of it. You have to think of IT and the projects that they're involved in as a business driver. That's where a company has an opportunity to get a competitive advantage. It's probably more expensive not to do it right. I hear statistics, whichever ones you want to believe, that probably 80% of brand new systems budgets are spent repairing the bugs that were built into them to begin with. And you can go all the way down the line and say, why did that happen? And there's tons of reasons why. We can talk about that.
What was the old saying? We don't have budget enough to do it right the first time, but we have tons of budget to maintain it later on.
That's right.
Yeah.
I recently talked with the CEO and president of the new Hyundai Information Systems, and I was so excited to talk with him beforehand because I'd read that in 1 year he had taken their budget from a 90% spent on maintenance and enhancements down to 49%.
Wow.
I mean, I was so impressed with this man, and other CIOs and thought leaders in organizations, I wish they could learn something from him. And that whole concept of you've got to put your money in the right place and put it towards doing the right things.
Talking about doing the right things, let's go back to project management and how project management helps me with my quality. There is also project management software. How can I use project management software properly in order to help me increase or improve quality on my project?
Well, even within project management software, there's probably
high quality and low
many
quality
different
products.
flavors of it, and it comes in all different sizes and shapes. My feeling about that is that it gives you a template so that you don't have to spend your energy, time, and thought processes on dealing with the template or the steps or the tradition of all the checklist things you have to do. And it gives you the opportunity to be freed up, to be creative, to listen more attentively, and to do a good job on what you're doing.
So it's not the project management software, if I hear you correctly, that does help me, but it's the fact that the project management software contains templates and lists built on past experience that will make sure that I don't forget anything, and therefore quality in my future projects should be higher.
Exactly.
All right. This is, of course, the perfect moment to also put in that your company, you also manufacture a project management software, right?
Actually, it's a process.
It's a process.
It's a process, and we offer
Can you
it as
give
a
us the
service.
30-second elevator speech here?
Okay. The elevator speech is that two heads are better than one.
Yes.
And the biggest problem with developing a system or building a system is communication. People use the same terms to mean different things, and they use different terminology to represent the same ideas. So it's very difficult to go around and interview many different people and synthesize what your results of those interviews are into a clear spec. I'm way over my 30 words, aren't I? So what we like to do is get everybody together in the same room and flush it out so that you ensure that you have consensus from the beginning. Good. And that's the essence of the concept.
All right. And for those listeners who are interested, we have a presentation about the process, if that's correct.
That's correct.
And we're going to make that process available through the website. Let's come back to the quality on our project. How interrelated are quality of the product and quality of the project management processes?
Well, I don't think you can end up with a good quality product if you have not used good quality processes to get there. I think you end up with hit and miss if you don't have a good process.
That's a fair answer. Are there any shortcuts that I can take in my project management approach and still deliver a high-quality product?
Actually, I think there are.
Oh.
Yeah. First of all, when you have somebody who really is experienced, who's been through a similar process many times, they know where you can shave off some time. They know what corners you can cut. I think you develop a sense of what works and experience. Likewise, I think there are some tools that enable you, tools and concepts we're getting into an area where there's a lot of reuse, service-oriented architectures where you have objects that you can reuse over and over again. Once these are tested and proven, that is going to abbreviate the life cycle and the duration of how long it takes to get a product to market and ultimately improve the quality of it. And of course, there are proven disciplined approaches that if you follow those steps are going to give you a higher probability of success than if you do your project haphazardly, which is a very common practice.
A major factor in every project are the requirements, always.
Absolutely.
And, of course, the better the quality of the requirements, the better will my end result be. So the consequential question has to be, how do I ensure that my requirements have a high quality?
Well, I think that ultimately, when you can afford, and I use that word liberally, to invest some time up front and get your business users, your business people, your management, and your technicians, and maybe even your marketing people together to really reach consensus on what they are doing and what they are not doing, what the effort involves. That's when you have a better shot at getting good requirements. The most critical part of every project is the very beginning. And if you don't get it right, the whole thing is going to be like a dominoes effect, and you'll never get that good quality at the end. There's so many problems intrinsic with trying to get good requirements. As I mentioned before, terminology is an enormous one. There's so much room for people to have different interpretations. People that are the experts in a given field do not have 100% perfect knowledge. Likewise, no matter how good of an analyst or whatever you are, you're going to misunderstand some portion of what these experts have told you. And when you try to piece together the very many thoughts that you collect from 10, 20, 30 different people, somebody along the way makes compromises and trade-offs in developing that specification, which is the foundation for their whole system. And it isn't always the business people that make those trade-offs and decisions. Very often it's an analyst or a developer who really doesn't even always have access to the bigger picture of what the organization is trying to achieve.
So open up our bag of tricks here for us. What do I do? How do I get around this? What best practices do I employ in order to solve that particular problem?
Well, there's a couple. My personal favorite is the collaborative approach. The old JAD sessions, they come in many shapes and forms, and there's a lot of people that are very knowledgeable on how to conduct them these days. But you get everybody in a room and lock the door and pound the information out of them.
Yes.
And you don't let them out until everybody sees things the same way. You have to make a big time commitment to take that approach. And you have to be willing to go in there with an open mind to hear other people out, understand their perspectives, and to look at things in a different way so you're learning from other people. And also you get the real benefit and value of building that camaraderie and team spirit, and we've been to war together. That's one whole way to approach requirements to make sure that you kind of jumpstart your project so that it doesn't drag on for months and months and you lose your enthusiasm and you can't even remember why you're there. Another way there are a lot of really good tools out there. The model-driven approach to requirements doesn't require that you get them absolutely correct the first time around. model-driven approaches like UML enable you to define what the process embedded in your systems are going to be. And then if you don't like them, you don't have that big recoding effort. You can go back, change the model, and then regenerate the code. Most organizations are not anywhere near that, but I believe there is a lot of promise there. I've seen some demonstrations that floored me where they built entire systems in hours based on really good models. And models should be reflecting how you run the business anyway. So, and I think there are other tools as well. Iterative development, where you take your high-risk components of the system and build those first, and then you have a lot of time through subsequent iterations to revise them based on business users putting their hands on them and trying them out and saying, well, that really doesn't work so well. I thought it was a great idea, but when I see it in practice, it's not coming out the way I expected it to. So there's a lot of ways to approach requirements to give you the best possible quality, and not one of them suits every situation.
Agreed. A lot of food for thought here, a lot of food for thought. Let's try to sum it up here. Let's bring it back again, try to get back to the basics. Where would you say do most projects fail in their approach to quality, and what can I, as a project manager, do about it?
I think where they fail, and let's make an assumption that they start off with a good set of requirements, is tracing those requirements and holding them as the yardstick throughout the whole project. Using your requirements as a baseline for your test cases to make sure when you finally ultimately get to the point where you're testing the system that you are actually doing what you intended to do, not just comparing numbers or the fill-in-the-blank answers that you thought you should get, but is it operating the way that you wanted it to? And making sure that your business users are intimately involved throughout that process. So there isn't one day when you open the door and turn the switch on where everybody says, okay, now we're on board, let's get trained and use it. And they have to go through a long learning curve. If you get them involved and keep them engaged throughout the whole life cycle, then you've all built this end result together. You have a stake in it, and you understand where you've made the trade-offs and why.
Great. Thank you very much for having been here today, Inez. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, too. I enjoyed being here.